unemployment rate in this country has hit its highest level in almost 4 years. We're now up from 4.5% to 4.6%. This is for the period of time, the 3 months to April. This is not a good picture because I've got to tell you as well, vacancy numbers, they also as well have declined. Baroness Jacqueline Foster, what do you think to this? We've seen some new policies from the Labour Party. Is this the effect of those kind of things? Is it something different? Your thoughts?
Well, it's a combination. The big kick-off really was the budget last year. And, you know, if anybody thinks that they're going to get growth in an economy by hammering those that actually create most of the jobs, which are the small and medium-sized businesses, which are the sort of 85% of the engine room with the supply chains that run this economy, then they're frankly disillusioned to, without any notice, increase the minimum wage, to increase the national insurance, which obviously affects not just that contribution, but those that are eligible for pensions. The benefits system, quite frankly, needs to be tackled because there are far too many people on benefits who shouldn't be on benefits and far too many people of working age who should actually be working. And so you've got a combination, actually, of issues here. And also, you know, that she managed to find a lot of money for the public sector, but there was no quid pro quo. I'm a former trade union negotiator. I understand the responsibility when you're actually doing paying conditions, and I hope that the crew who I negotiated for at the time certainly had very good reward. But nevertheless, there is a responsibility, and I don't think that this government understood that there was a responsibility to do that. And then, in addition, just these other issues, you know, the Chagos Islands, you know, paying to give away territory that we actually own, with no justification for Mauritius to take over. And, you know, Ed Miliband with his, you know, carbon capture and literally billions on all sorts of, I suppose, projects, really, that we don't really have any insight for, and we have no guarantee that it's going to be working.
Curtis?
I agree with a lot of what you say there, actually. Where I disagree is the benefit side. I'll get to that. But the problem we have, you're absolutely right. Excuse me. Phone, sorry.
It's breaking the place already. It's only been sat here for 2 seconds. Go on.
You won't have me back on, will you?
Go on.
So you're right that small businesses, medium-sized businesses are really struggling. And they are competing against large corporations. I think that's a real big factor here. What's interesting, I think, to me, is the fact that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's growth plan is pathetic because they are tinkering around the edges. They're not looking at growth in a holistic way. When you watch TV, you hear politicians and people in the media say, growth, growth, growth. Well, you know, we're the fastest growing economy in the G7. A lot of people go, what does that even mean? Yeah. Because growth doesn't mean anything to your average person. What's happening is corporations can be posting record profits, or consumer debt is another thing that goes into growth. So basically, if ordinary working class or middle class people are poorer because they're borrowing more, that adds into the total value of growth. That's not necessarily a good thing. What we need to be looking at is a growth which is either bottom up or middle out. How do you do that? You have to tackle gross levels of inequality. Now, this is not about being it's not about fairness or the politics of envy. It's about saying we need more money in average people's pockets so they can go out and spend. What's happening is a lot of people are spending all the money on rent and mortgages. So you want to take money off rich people and give it to poorer people? Yeah, but obviously, when I say rich, who do you imagine?
No, well, I don't know, because I'm not proposing it. You tell me.
So for me, I'm not talking about those who've done quite well, those who've grown their businesses. I'm talking about the billionaire class and the corporations. Oh. And I don't want to look at increasing income taxes necessarily. It should be about a wealth tax, because if we don't do anything about it, it's going to get worse. Now, what's interesting what you said about benefits, I know there's this pervasive idea. I just want to make that point quickly.
Finish this point. She's about to spontaneously combust, but hang on. Go on, finish your point.
There is this pervasive idea that, well, we need to cut benefits to force people into work. And you can understand the logic there. It makes sense, right? What's interesting is in Denmark, they have a higher labour rate of participation, which a fancy phrase of more working age people are in work than the UK. In 2022, it was like 80%, 2024, 75%. Look at the UK, only 53% of people in work, yet Denmark have a far higher or far generous welfare state. So there's actually no correlation between cutting benefits or reforming welfare to get people into work. You need to look at the entire economy holistically and rebalance it so people can participate in the economy in a more meaningful way.
Well, I think the word holistically is an overused word. I think the comment you made about inequality or whatever, there's nothing compared to when I started in the workforce decades ago. To make a comparison with the Danish economy, you know, I've travelled my entire life and lived in a number of countries, and I was also in the European Parliament for 15 years. So. You know, you can't make a comparison there just because you see something.
I think you can, yeah.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can.
Because these systems are actually completely different.
Well, how are they, in what way are they different?
Notwithstanding, we have a population of nearly 70 million. We have... as I said, we have different types of workforces, and we've created different benefit systems. I think what you will find in Denmark, that people aren't basically loitering on the sofa year in and year out with actually getting a job. And what's happened here is this is where we come to the benefit system. The oversight on the benefit system's not been strenuous enough. There are far too many people who are on disability.
The benefits are higher in Denmark, so why is it?
It's irrelevant.
But it isn't, because you're making a statement which is X equals Y. But I want to understand the logic behind that. So why is Denmark different to the UK?
My logic is quite clear. Because you can't do like for like. What I'm saying is we have a very generous benefit system. When I was a child, I think mothers got something like, you know, I don't know, maternity. They didn't have any maternity leave, and they got, unfortunately, we've moved on, and they got, you know, something for one child. The benefit system is massively comprehensive. And that's fine. But the trouble is it's got out of control. And what we have is a system. We'll come to the migration issue probably in a minute. But what we've done is we've had a lot of cheap labour that has come in, which that's taken the levels of earnings down at times. And that's left...
I disagree with that.
Well, just let me finish. And that's left a lot of people who already live here basically lounging on the sofa and thinking, well, my benefits are great. Why should I get out of bed? Why should I get out of bed for another 20 quid a week? And we've got to get rid of that mentality, because it's the same people...
You're using anecdotes here. You're not looking at the facts.
People
I've told you the facts.
Who seem to be contributing to this economy year in and year out. And a lot of them are actually older.
But what about his point that he made then? So Kurtz was suggesting this wealth tax on what he's saying, your billionaires, your people like that. What?
Michelle, this is the old chestnut. And I have to tell you, since the last budget, the number of millionaires and people who do create wealth in this country and employ people have been leaving.
That's actually... I want to tackle that myth. That's not true. So basically, individual millionaires...
Let me finish the sentence and then you can come back.
But you've spoken for quite a while. So individual millionaires have left, but it's the assets...
Right, hang on, pack it in, you two.
It's the assets that matter. We're also going to have the first trillionaire.
The
old chestnut about a billionaire or somebody's rich. Who the hell do you think employs people? It's people very often who've started with very little, put their house on the line.
But you're speaking in platitudes. I'm looking at the data, and the data suggests that we're going to have the world's first trillionaire.
Talking to people.
What do you say to the fact that we're going to have the world's first trillionaire, and you're telling me that inequality isn't a problem?
Why shouldn't we have a trillionaire?
Who's the first trillionaire? Who's that going to be?
Why shouldn't we have a trillionaire and billionaires? Why shouldn't we?
Because, OK, so the way...
Just put some...
I don't know, I've got two questions I want to... The first is why shouldn't we have a trillionaire?
Why shouldn't we?
Wealth doesn't come out of nowhere, it's redistributed. When you get trillionaires, it's off the backs of the workers. Wages are low, not high. In Denmark, they are high. I mean, you're an ex-trade union, so I thought you might appreciate that. So the fact is that we are going to get...
from you.
Well, we're going to get gross... We have gross levels of inequality. But again, it's not about penalising people. Now, in terms of your idea that millionaires are leaving, individual millionaires who claim non-dom, who aren't paying taxes, are going, so what? But they can't take their assets with them. And that is where people are making a lot of their money. It's through assets, through housings, all these things.
The laws have been
But non-doms is a very small part of it.
The laws have been changed on tightening up what people should pay in tax.
If we don't address the gross levels of inequality, people are going to get poorer. We need more money. We need more money in people's pockets so they can spend it into the economy. It's very simple.
Of those that generate wealth in this country pay a lot more tax than you seem to think.
I'm not talking about income tax. I'm talking about a wealth tax.
There's other taxes.
But also workers generate an income as well.
I'll just say this, because it's clearly like talking to a wall. What we've always said about the left is they're great at spending other people's money. And you have no concept on what people have done in this country, the likes of the Alan Sugars and others, who from kids of 15 years old put their lives on the line to create the wealth and to build this country up.
But workers, you do realise that workers also create the wealth.
I was a worker. What jobs have you done?
Don't try and evade the point. The question I want to ask you is, if workers have more money in their pockets, they can spend it.
If they're spending,
right. So when inequality is worse and people are getting poorer, that is why. And those small businesses, by the way, they are not rehiring. They are not rehiring after people being let go. They can't afford.
Listen, you two, you need to take... Right.
You haven't answered any of my questions, I'm afraid.
Right, in a minute, no one's going to be answering anyone's questions, so I'll kick you both off if you don't behave, because people at home, this is not an enjoyable experience. You've got people in the cars listening, you've got people relaxing on the sofas in the pyjamas listening. They can't hear you if you're both shouting over each other, so you're on your fair warning now, so pack it in. Right, I don't care what jobs he's done. His point is... He's suggesting that there's an inequality, that people are going to work. He's saying that the only people that are reaping the rewards from that are the owners of the businesses. What do you say back to that?
Well, because it's a nonsensical concept. It's a nonsensical comment. Do you think that there wasn't inequality in the communist states in Soviet Russia?
I never said any of that. What's that got to do with this, though?
No, because you seem to have this thinking that there's always... Of course there is.
I'm really surprised you were a trade unionist.
Look, he didn't let me finish the point.
Honestly, because this is disrespectful to my viewers, and I'm not having my viewers disrespected. They cannot follow the conversation when you both chipping in over the top of each other. Let me ask you a question, because I hear about this wealth tax all the time, and many viewers will sit there. I'm a capitalist, but actually when you do find out when people are structuring their affairs in a certain way and they're paying low levels of effective tax, it does feel very unfair to people. So I hear this notion about wealth tax frequently.
Yeah.
I heard it at the weekend. There was a historian, TV presenter, Dan Snow, I think was his name. He was on a panel show, political panel show, and he was talking about paying the wealthy paying more tax. And he sat on national television and he said, you know, I would gladly pay more tax. I hear people like Dale Vince sitting there saying, well, I would gladly pay more tax. What I don't understand is if there is this sentiment, and it's a valid sentiment, your perspective is very valid and fair, but if it's a valid perspective that all of these wealthy people, many of them are desperate to pay more tax, why are so many of those people then not putting their money where their mouths are, voluntarily making tax payments over and above what they need to HMRC to lead by example and demonstrate how they themselves, by paying more, can help level up if that's what they're so passionate about? Because they're not doing that. They're just sitting there trying to lecture to change policy without leading by example.
That's a good question. I think if you're going to base on volunteering your taxes, how many people are going to do that? You need to make sure enough people do it. The reason why I think the tax system's broken is because the Conservatives, the Labour Party, are funded by corporations. I mean, they're taking millions and millions of pounds of health insurance companies, oil companies. They lobby our politicians to say, we want to write your tax code. So it's not about whether it works or not. It's not about whether people leave the country. It's about political will, because our political system has been controlled by the big corporates, and people are very, very angry about that.
Right, final say to you on this one, Jacqueline.
Well, it's been a very fascinating debate, but the reality is, maybe the difference is, I don't look at data all the time. I've spent my entire career talking to people on the doorstep and seeing how people really live. And there's a vast difference. And I would suggest, actually, you should go out and talk to an awful lot of people and just see live in the real world, because we can all have... I'd love to pay everybody 150 grand a week. It doesn't work like that. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the points that you've made are frankly, they're just not realistic at all.